This is chapter number 10, 18th century political formations. So this discussion, which is the name is 18th century political formations. But the content here main is the decline of Mughal Empire. The whole story, the whole discussion is about the decline of the great empire of the subcontinent. As I told you, that history is about dates, events, and joining them. So there are certain dates like 1526, 1707, and before that we have 1200. So from 1200 to 1526, it was the reign Shasankal of Delhi Sultanate. From 1526, there was a battle, and then Babur came and then started the Mughal Empire. And it went up to 1707. It went ahead also, but 1707, it was the end of Aurangzeb. We know about Babur, Jahangir, Humayun, Akbar, Aurangzeb. These were great emperors of Mughal Empire. But after 1707, when Aurangzeb died, after his death, the Mughal Empire, the height of the Mughal Empire, it went arsh to farsh. So this is all about discussion of the same thing. So we are going to discuss certain places. One day nothing happens. It takes a long time. That is history. So the Mughal Empire, it was not, right now we know Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan. It was not like that previously. Everything was Indian subcontinent. So the people were, they were trying to find land, they were having wars. Everyone was having, it was not about any religion or caste or creed. It was just about getting that area and conquering that area. So this whole area with dotted lines was the external boundary of the Mughal Empire in 1700. And what we are going to discuss is this six: Jats, Awadhs, Bengal, Malwa, Hyderabad, Marathas, how they find this time, how they form their own reign, how they form their own Rajya, places, Prant, and what was the reason behind it. So we will talk about them one by one. What were the paristhitiyan, what was the factors, what was the reason behind, and what happened when the decline of Mughal Empire started. So we are talking about the 18th century, 1700 to 1800. And here in this particular period, it saw various events and in a very small or a very tiny duration of time. There were different kingdoms which came up, different reign, different people who stood up. And when we talk about 1765, it was a starting or beginning of a new era. This map is showing the territory under British control. This is mid-18th century, that is around 1750 we are talking about. These regions which are shaded in the pink or light shaded region, these are the area which are already being captured by East India Company, or rather you can say the Britishers. They came into India as traders, but now they have the control of these areas. I'm talking about 1750. So the Britishers, they grabbed major chunks, part of the territory in Eastern India. So this Eastern India, you have north, here south and east and west. So we are talking about the eastern area, mainly Bengal and the below part of Orissa. So these regions were already being captured by Britishers. That is around 1750 we are talking about. And then, as I said, in a very short span of time, relatively very short span of time, this subcontinent, India, saw dramatic changes. All the events, all the things were very rapid. and it was so fast. There were emergence of coming up of various different political groups, various different ethnic, religious, or thought or language groups which came up. So let me divide it into two parts. It starts all from 1707, the first half of the 18th century, and it started with Aurangzeb's death. Aurangzeb was, whatever you say about him, he was a great emperor. Because all the Mughal emperors till Aurangzeb, they did something or the other. They gave us certain events, they gave us certain history. So after Aurangzeb, he was a very strong emperor. But when he died 1707, the thing changed. Okay? So after Aurangzeb, there were various Mughal emperor came. I'm not saying one or two, many. But they could not carry that legacy of Akbar, Aurangzeb, Jahangir, Humayun, etc. After that, there was a battle of Panipat in 1761. Now, this is important. These battles, when we talk about this Panipat or Plassey or Buxar, they have changed the course of the game. So, we will talk about the later Mughals. But before that, let me tell you about these battles. These are very important. If you understand why this battle happened and how this paved the way to change the entire history. So there were three battles of Panipat. So they changed the course of the history. First of all, this is Delhi. You know about the capital now, Indian capital. Now around 100 kilometers, precisely 97 kilometers, 60 miles. This is a place called Panipat. So the first battle of Panipat was fought between Babur and Ibrahim Lodi. Ibrahim Lodi is one of the last Delhi sultans. So there was Babur and Ibrahim Lodi fighting in Panipat, and Babur won this battle. Second battle of Panipat was between Hemu and Akbar. It was on 5th November 1556. Now Hemu and Akbar, and here Akbar, the great Mughal emperor, he won. And Hemu was actually the Samrat Hem Chandra Vikramaditya. He was in affection called as Hemu. So there was a fight between them. And finally, the Sipah Salar of Akbar's general, basically, the Khan Zaman and Bairam Khan, they got or retrieved victory from Hemu. This is the second battle. The third battle is very important, which is related to this topic also. Ahmad Shah Durrani or Ahmad Shah Abdali and the Marathas. So this was not the war between two people. This was the war between Afghans and the Marathas. Because with Afghans, there were two allies. That is the Rohilla, Najib-ud-Dawla, Afghans of Doab region, and Shuja-ud-Dawla, he was the Nawab of Awadh. So they fought with Ahmad Shah Durrani against Marathas. And the Senapati or the general who fought was Sadashiv Rao Bhau. And there was a fight, there was a war, and finally the Afghans won the game. So this is how the battles you need to understand, because they change the history. So what was the crisis? Why was the Mughal Empire declined, or what was the reasons? So the success which was achieved by Mughal Empire was unprecedented. It was at the highest level. The way Akbar and they proclaimed the power of administration, it was immense. So there are various factors. One by one we are going to discuss this. First is Aurangzeb. He was the last proper known Mughal emperor. So he was in contest or in fight, in war with the Deccan Empire, or there were other, Nizami Shahi and all those Deccan, there were various regime there. So this is the place I'm showing. You can remember it by the Hyderabad name. Deccan Chargers, IPL, remember? So this was the fight of Aurangzeb with these Deccan forces. And it was going on and on. So the financial resources, that is the money, and the military resources, that is the people who were fighting, like the elephants and the cavalry, artillery, all were depleted. So Aurangzeb put a lot of effort, put a lot of resources, money, etc. in this war. And it was ongoing war. So he has a zid. He wanted, because he was a strong leader. So after that, whosoever came, the Mughal emperor, the khazana was khali. That means the account was zero. There was no money with them, no power. Because if you don't have money, if you don't have satta, power, you don't have anything. You need to have money to show your power. So this fight depleted the resources of Mughal Empire, and finally the later coming, we will call them as later Mughals, Parvarti Mughal. So they didn't have any money now. So the later Mughals, LM I'm going to write, the later Mughals, they had nothing to do for. So they had no power or the administrative power to control the people whom they have appointed. For example, Akbar, he started Mansabdari Vyavastha. He started so many good, administration techniques that is still going on in our country. So the administration he started and other Mughal emperor propagated. These later Mughals, they didn't control it. I'm saying if your mother father is there and you are kids, if your mother father is not taking care of you, they're not asking what are you doing on your mobile, where are you going, who are your friends, what will happen? You will be, you will get spoiled or you will go in a wrong track. So there has to be a check from your father and mother and your guardian. This always happens. Same way, the Mughal Samrajya or the Mughal emperor, if they are not able to keep check of the Mansabdars they have appointed themselves or their previous emperors have appointed them. So the Mansabdars, they thought this emperor is not having any power, he is not having any money, so let us be free. Why are we listening to him? We are Mansabdars, we have money, we have power, let us have our own regime, our kingdom. So now these later Mughals have no control or they couldn't control the powerful Mansabdars, the powerful appointees. So the Prashasanik Vyavastha or the administration skill was not with these later Mughals as it would have been with the previous ones. So 3 battles I told you. The first was between Babar Ibrahim Lodi, second was Hemu Akbar, and third was Afghans and Marathas. So as I was indicating, the Mansabdars and the governors, they became so strong and they were aware that the king has no money, they have no power, they have no resources. So what they did, they controlled the money, revenue. See, today we have GST, Goods and Services Tax. That means if you see our Prime Minister going in crores of aircraft, that aircraft is from our money. All the Vidhayaks and the MPs, they are enjoying their time. This is because of our money. You are giving tax. And because of this tax, the roads are being built. The subsidy you are getting is from this tax only. So if you are doing some merchant work, you will be giving some money. If you are working in government servant, you have to pay some tax. So the revenue is exactly like that. So the revenue, this governor and the Subedar started taking, and the military administration, because at that time it was all about getting money from the land and fighting, getting more land, fighting, war. It was all about that. Not like today that having a IT setup computer and having websites, not like that. So the revenue control and the military control was totally taken by these Mansabdars and Subedars, which are actually appointed by the Mughal Samrajya, Mughal Empire. So Diwani Faujdari is what? Diwani means money related, revenue, paisa, earth. And Faujdari is all about the power, the military administration, the elephants, the horses, the soldiers, the artillery. So these all are controlled by the Mansabdars and the Subedars. They got all the control. actually these, you can say, they snatched the control from the Mughal Empire to themselves. So that is how they got the extraordinary power of, or they become extraordinarily self-sufficient in terms of political, that is, see, politically, economically and military wise, these people, Mansabdars, Subedars, governors, chieftains, all they became powerful. So when they became powerful and they took all the control of the money, revenue and the military aspects. So the money which was going to the Mughal Samrajya or Mughal rulers, it was not going. It actually declined. The kar, the taxes, were only being kept by the Subedas rather than giving it to the main leaders. So this decline, the revenue, the money declined. Now there is one more reason of the decline. The peasant, that is the kisan or the farmers and the zamindars. See, if two people are there, you say you're a worker, okay, clean my shoes or go and get vegetable for me. The person will say, no sir, I am not being appointed for this. I won't be able to clean your shoes. So he will revolt. He will go against you. He'll talk against you. Same thing happened here. The peasant, the farmer and the zamindars, they revolted. They rebelled. And why revolted? Because they have some grudges. They have certain problems. So the northern part and the western part, here we saw a lot of people, which belongs to the category of peasants and zamindar. They were revolting against the Mughal empire. The first reason was taxes. See, if there is a farmer and he is giving 100 rupees, 100 at that time. So you come and you say, no, you have to pay 500 now. And the farmer is saying, oh, I am not even able to pay 100 rupees and you are asking me to pay 500 rupees. So the person will say, aapko kode padenge. You will be beaten. So he'll say, okay, you beat me. I won't be able to give you 500. So let's revolt. You know, this is how revolt will come. First of all, because of the mounting taxes. The taxes levied by too much. There is one more reason why these revolt took place. There were certain powerful chieftains, that is, powerful sardars, and they want to consolidate or solidify their own position. They wanted to get those powers, and for that they will revolt. They'll come with the peasants and they will start revolting, right? So even in the reign of Akbar or Humayun, Jahangir, the revolt was happening, but these Mughal emperors were strong enough to control it. Even the Aurangzeb was able to control it. But the economic resources now was with these Mansabdars and Subedars and the Zamindars. So now the power, because they are now economically strong, so the Mansabdars, the governors, the Subedars, the chieftains, Sardar, the provincial governors, the local chieftains, all these were gradually getting the power. So that is, the political and economical authority was coming to them slowly and gradually. Let me tell you, these political governors and local chieftains, they consolidated their power, getting the revenue and military administration, and finally the Mughal Empire power was going to them. They were controlling everything rather than Mughal Empire or the emperor controlling it. So that is how these Mughal emperor cannot or were not able to check on this. So that is how things declined. It is being said that rich harvest, so the harvests were good, farmers were getting a lot of cultivation, etc. But there were empty coffers. That means the Mughal Empire khazana or the bhandar money was depleting. They don't get anything. Now adding the salt to the sour means all these things were happening. There were various Mughal emperors. We'll talk about Farrukh Siyar, we'll talk about Shah Alam, we'll talk about Alamgir II, Ahmad Shah. All these were there, right? But this Shah Alam was named as Shah Palam. You know why? Because they don't have any power. They just have a power from their Lal Kila to Palam or Raisina Hills. So they were emperors, but they were not actually emperors. They were just the name which was left of the great legacy of Mughal emperorship. If you have money, if you have that valor, then only you are powerful. Otherwise, if you don't have money, nobody cares. So there were two people I am going to name who added this, ghee to the fire. Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali. They came to the subcontinent and they invaded it. So from Iran, it was ruler of Iran. He was called Nadir Shah. Nadir Shah of Iran. He came to Delhi. New Delhi, basically it was Delhi at that time. Sacked, plundered, means he invaded, he did everything, took all the money, all the resources which he could get in 1739. That is, he took a lot of wealth with him. That is, the Mughal Empire was already declining, and he broke the backbone of these Mughal Empire because he took everything. There was not left anything, but he took whatever is left. And again, there was another attack, and it was a continuous attack by the Afghan ruler Ahmad Shah Abdali. Ahmad Shah Durrani we call. And Ahmad Shah Abdali, he was Afghan ruler, and he came and he invaded India. Nadir Shah only once. But he, 13 saal 5 bawal, 13 saal 5 bawal, in the reign of 13, in the time of 13 year, that is 1748 to 1761, he came 5 times, invaded the subcontinent and the Mughal Empire, and whatever is left, even the needle what was left, he took away. So the Mughal Empire, which was already on the verge of collapse, he added that, shame to them. So these are different reasons. Okay, there was one more reason. What happened here? As you know, Mughal Empire and the emperor became very, very weak. So as you see a Mughal Empire, there will be a court. There are people sitting like the Abhijat work of the nobility or the big people like mantris, etc. So whosoever came here, the later Mughal emperor, so there was a group. There were different groupism took place. One group was the Iranian. The other group was Turani, basically Turkish. So Iranian group and Turkish group, there was a clear partition between them, and they fought also. Psychologically also they fight in between. But they were under this Mughal emperor only. So the Mughal emperor became a puppet, Katputli, of these two groups. One time someone will, pull him, sometime other will pull him. So he has no power, but the other, because they were powerful, they would just treat him like a puppet. So it is clearly written, the emperor were treated as just puppets. So I am telling you this shameful, very sharm ki baat. What will happen? You will just feel bad about them, the Mughal emperors. Because Mughals have given us a lot. Whatever people say today, but Mughal emperors, Delhi sultans, they are the basic building block of today's India. Okay, don't go about religion, caste, creed, etc. Taj Mahal, where is Taj Mahal? What is Taj Mahal? Everyone who comes to India wants to see Taj Mahal. He was made by Shah Jahan, he was a Mughal emperor. So and the administration way, all these Mughals have given us. But what will happen in the later part? The Farrukhsiyar. Now Farrukhsiyar, after that Alamgir II, I showed you the picture. Farrukhsiyar from 1713 to 1719 and Alamgir II from 1754 to 1759. These two, they were Mughal emperors, later Mughal emperors, and you will be surprised to know this Abhijat Varg nobility, these Iranis, Turanis are Indian Muslims, whosoever was there, I don't know exactly, but these people, they actually killed them. They killed Farrukhsiyar, they killed Alamgir too. Can you imagine? The emperors were killed by their nobility. They were assassinated and killed. So this was one feather of shame. I'll take you one more step ahead. Not only this, I told you about Ahmad Shah and Shah Alam II, Ahmad Shah from 1748 to 1754, and Shah Alam II from 1759 to 1816. And these two were blinded. इनकी आंखें फोड़ दी गई थी, इनकी आंखें निकाल ली गई थी. They were blinded by this nobility, by the same people whom they were governing, whom they are ruler of. Right? So this was the shame which happened for the later Mughal, and we are very sorry about that because it happens. We are essentially talking at that time the decline of Mughal Empire. So we are going to talk about emergence of new states, and this is followed when Mughal Empire started declining. It started ending. I'll just give you an example before I discuss. Dhirubhai Ambani, we know, he was millionaire, billionaire, he had so much of money. Then he has two sons, Mukesh Ambani and Anil Ambani. So when these two kids, they fought in court. So they got money, different sectors. Now Anil Ambani is now on floor and Mukesh Ambani is now fourth or fifth richest person on this earth. Can you imagine? That is, Mughal Empire, when it ends or something which ends, so how people get the control, how they mature themselves. Some may get some new state or make themselves up, some may not. So in this Mughal Empire, we are talking about Aurangzeb. When he died 1707, after that everything changed. The governors, the people, the authorities, the Abhijatwar, the nobility, so the governors, the subedars, the zamindars, so they tried to consolidate the power, their authority, their control over different parts of the subcontinent. Why? Because they knew that the Mughal emperors, they don't have any money. Mughal emperors are now, they are only because of their name, their power, their money is almost finished. So people found a way, or you can say an opportunity to get it. So when I tell you 18th century, the Mughal Empire, it fragmented, it broke into different parts, fragmented, broken into number of different regional states, Kshetriya states. So we talk about mainly three kind of partitions, which states we can refer to. That is the states which are found, how they are related, how they are different from one another. These three names we are going to talk about: Saadat Khan, Murshid Qali Khan, Asafza. So I am talking about the first one, which is the Awadh, this Bengal, and the Hyderabad. Awadh, Bengal, Hyderabad. It was a very big region. So first thing is that the states which are found after or during this 18th century, we divide them in overlapping groups. So why overlapping groups? Because they have certain in common or they have certain in different. These three, whatever states they have formed, we will talk about them in later part, but these overlapping groups, that is, the states are found or they are born in a different way. Some of them, first I am telling you, the first category of the states being formed. So the first category of Awadh, like Awadh, Bengal and Hyderabad, and they were quite powerful and they were almost independent. That is, they have their own rule. So these rulers, this Awadh and Bengal and Hyderabad, they became independent, or they tried to become independent, but they didn't break their formal relation ties with Mughal emperor. Can you understand this? This three which name I am taking, they made their own powerful and independent states, but they still kept relationship with Mughal emperor. They still made an impression that we are under Mughal emperor. First type of states you understood, Awadh, Bengal and Hyderabad. They were telling, or they were in this perception or giving the perception to Mughal empire that we are together. Second kind of states which are being formed, they were almost independent under the Mughals, main Mughals. So like the Rajputs. Now Rajputs, they were having the roti beti ka rishta. They were the Mughal empire or Mughal emperor's wives were Rajput. So they were given Watan Jagirs. They were respectfully treated by Mughals, and they were getting Watan Jagirs. So Watan Jagirs means the area, land, they are owner of that. Okay. So this is the kind of Rajput principalities you can talk about. Watan Jagirs they were getting. Third kind of states, which were these states, badi mushkil se, in a very difficult way, Mughal empire took control of them. Maratha, Sikhs and the Jats. But they were of differing size, they were changing, the size were changing, but they were always fighting with Mughals because they wanted the independence always. Because Mughal empire, when it was powerful, they couldn't do anything, They tried to resist, but they couldn't. But when the declination started, the Mughals were so less powerful now, almost in decline. Maratha, Sikhs and Jats, they took their own, everything on their own, and then they started fighting or a struggle to get themselves independent from Mughal empire. Okay? Means there was always some khatpat with the Mughal empire. They were not like a Rajput state or these states being formed in the first case. Okay? So finally they actually found their way also, the third kind of states. So hope you understand there were three kind of states which were formed with different characteristics and overlapping states also. So I'm talking about the old Mughal provinces. The three which started, I started with the Awadh, Bengal and Hyderabad. This Awadh, this Bengal and this Hyderabad. Hyderabad is just a city now, but it was not at that time. Awadh is just supposed to be Lucknow. It's not. It was a very big empire created by certain people. And who created them? See, this is the Darbar. This is a code, Mughal code. Now these people are nobility. These people are very close to the Mughals. They are having high rank people, or who are mansabdars, who were made mansabdars. So the nobility, we always talk nobility means those Mughals they believe in. That is, these are our right hand, these are our left hand. Okay. So the Awadh Nawab was made, Saadat Khan was made, he was of nobility, and Saadat Khan was made, or he created, Saadat Khan created, or they were governors of large provinces, Saadat Khan Awadh, Murshid Quli Khan Bengal, and Asaf Zah Hyderabad. And one of them is not, but almost all of them were mansabdars. They occupied, they held high positions in Mughal empire. They were mansabdars. One of them was not. I'll tell you what was the difference. But all these three, Saadat Khan, Murshid Quli Khan, Asaf Zah, they were mansabdars, and when they went there, they took control of that area, and knowing the actual inside of the Mughal empire, they took control of that area and became the rulers or governors. So, as I am saying that this nobility were of higher rank. And how do we decide the rank? You remember I told you, the Zat. So, Mansabdars, this Mansabdar MSB, they were holding a very high Zat, Zat or Z. So, this Zat, that is the rank, how much cavalry they have, how much, they will be given the area for control. So 7,000, Asaf Zah and Murshid Quli Khan, they were holding this Murshid Quli Khan, 7,000. So Asafzar, Murshid Qali Khan, they were having Zat rank of 7,000, and Sadat Khan, the Zat was 6,000, and 7,000, 6,000 was quite high to be close enough to the Mughal empire or Mughal big people. Okay, so let us start with this Hyderabad. Hyderabad, the name, everyone, these three people we are talking about, everyone was given name, they were provided a name, and they were called by a name. So Nizam ul Mulk Asaf Zah, he founded Hyderabad. And he was a very, very powerful, very efficient, very trustworthy Mughal emperor courtier, or you can say the nobility. So Farrukh Siyar, the person you see here, he was the Mughal emperor at that time, and he told him, Asafzar, to go to Awadh. And then after some time he said, okay, you go to Deccan. So first he went to Awadh and then went to Hyderabad. That means the Asafzar, when he came to that area, this area, Hyderabad, he took control of both the powers, that is the political powers and the money power, that is the financial power. So he took total control, full control of Rajnetik, Arthik, political and financial matters, administration in his hand. So he also found the advantage, and he took the advantage because there was all kind of turmoils, fighting, and different parties involved. So there was turmoil, and he took advantage, benefit of that turmoil, problems in the Deccan. And also because in this area, the nobility, the Mughal nobility, were having a lot of competition, they were having a lot of trouble in between them. So this is how he took advantage, being a Mansabdar of high rank, and he knew that there is a problem. So he gathered the power in his hands, he took control of the hands, and he became the ruler of the region, Nizam ul Mulk Asafzar. So as I was telling, that he was first being sent to UP region. This is right now UP region, and this is the Awadh Ilaka, Awadh region. So whenever you work somewhere, you will be having friends, and you know that, okay, this guy is good, this guy is not. So the soldiers, the good soldiers, the skilled soldiers, the Sainiks, and the administrators, the good administrators, the powerful administrators, the trustworthy administrators from northern India, what Asafzar did, he took them, or he bought them, he requested them, he brought them to this part, this Deccan area, south, because now he is in south, he is Hyderabad controller now. So he appointed Mansabdars and granted Jagirs. Means, Mansabdars were done by the Mughal Empire. But now he himself gave these administrators, etc., Mansabdars, and gave them Jagirs. That is the land he gave. But he always, said everyone, and give a perception that he is under Mughal Emperor. But though he was supposed to be under Mughal Emperor, but he was not taking no orders from Mughal Emperors or Mughal Empire, and there is no interference of Mughal Empire in his work, Asafzar work. Okay, there is no interference of Mughal Empire in his work, and he was not even taking any orders. Or whatever he has decided, he is also, these people were called as Nizam also, Nizam ul Mulk, Nizam, Hyderabad Nizam. So whatever he has decided, the Mughal Emperor will just, put a stamp. Okay, whatever decided, okay, we agree to that. So this area, the state of Hyderabad, as I said, there were problems on the left and right. So Marathas were somewhere just near to them. So he found certain problems there also. He was constantly fighting or resisting or engaged in struggle, fight, competition with the Marathas and Telugu warriors, chiefs, Nayakas. So this part, left part and right part, that is the Purab and Paschim, that is the west part and the east part. So Asafzar was fighting or resisting the Marathas from this side, and on this side Telugu warrior chiefs, Ladake, Telugu Ladake Nayakas were called that. That is this plateau area I am talking about. So he was constantly fighting and constantly in conflict with these. So this is the Coromandel region. This is the Malabar coast, Coromandel coast and Malabar coast. So what he wanted, Asaf Zah has a good ambition. He has a huge ambition that let me get this Coromandel area, because the textile production, textile export, it's a rich area for textile producing area. This is Coromandel coast. He wanted to go that side and control also. He has that, ambition, belief. He wanted to do that. But the problem was, the British were there. The British checked that, resisted, checked, and arrested also this ambition. Now coming to Awadh, Burhan ul Mulk Saadat Khan. Saadat Khan, this is the picture of Saadat Khan, Burhan ul Mulk Saadat Khan. Now he was made the Subedar of Awadh in 1722. This area, this region, he was made the Subedar. Who? Saadat Khan. He was also called as Burhan ul Mulk, Burhan ul Mulk Saadat Khan. Now this Awadh region, if you see, it's a very strategic place, very fertile. Ganga, Yamuna, all these tributaries, the land is very fertile. The land is very good for the crop and cultivation. Okay. So this also there is a route, trade between Bengal and the northern part of India. It was a great trade route. So he has a very good position, strategic position he was holding. So this the route and also the alluvial Ganga plain he has. And as I said, Burhanul Mulk, Asaf Zah did what? He took control of the financial and the political power. And though Saadat Khan was also a Mansabdar, so he took control of the Subedari, Diwani and Faujdari. Subedari, Diwani and Faujdari, that is the political power, the financial power, military power, all this province or Prant or Rajya or state of Awadh, he took control, right? That is the military power, the financial power and the whole administration he took. So this whole area, if you see, his control, because if you take control of these three, even if you talk about Hyderabad, Awadh, and we are going to talk about Bengal also, you are going to be the leader, you are going to be the ruler. Okay. And if you want to stop the Mughal intervention, what you are going to do? These three exactly did that. So he started reducing the number of office holders which are appointed by the Mughals, Jagirdars, because Jagirdars were appointed by Mughal office bearers. So he started reducing the number of these office holders. He reduced them. And also one more thing he did, because the Jagirdar he reduced, and also the area of Jagirs, that is the area from where they can take the land revenue, this also he reduced. So Saadat Khan, whosoever is close to them, Saadat Khan, his own people, that is, you can call them as a loyal servant of Saadat Khan, they were appointed as the Jagirdars. Okay. And in order to check whether some corruption is going on or cheating is going on, he also checked he tried to check each and every area, all the districts, and he reassessed, he rechecked, re-evaluated the revenues of each area. That is, every region, what amount should be the revenue he should get, his empire should get, Awadh should get. So by his officials, for example, 100 rupees you are getting, no, this area should get 200 rupees. That is how reassessment took place. And he also did, he went ahead, he seized a number of Rajput Zamindaris also. That is, also the Afghans were holding a very good region of Rohilkhand, fertile land. So he took these two areas also, Rajput areas, Burhanul Mulk, Saadat Khan, he seized, he controlled, he annexed now various Rajput Zamindaris, and also very fertile agricultural fertile land which was held by Afghans in the area of Rohilkhand. Rohilkhand you can understand to be Bareilly region. So this Rohilkhand, okay, Rohilkhands. Now what happened? The state at that time, the state would depend on what? To take money from the bankers who are having a lot of money, Mahajans who would lend money for loan for certain interest. So the state and other people were dependent on these bankers and Mahajans. Not very much, but it happened. Gradually it increased. So this one of the land or the land, they were auctioned. Okay, some person will come, these three are coming, and they will say, okay, you have to give us 500. So one will say, okay, I will give. One will say 200, one will say 300, or someone will say 500. So they say, okay, you will give us 500 every year or every month, whatever they decided. And these were called as revenue farmers and called as ijaredar. Those people who took a land and said, okay, we will give you this much amount, fixed amount, they were called as ijaredar. In certain auction, they were the highest bidders. I hope you understand. The ijaredar took the land and they will say, okay, this fixed amount, we are the revenue farmers, and we are going to give you money. So this fixed sum of money, can you imagine this? Revenue farmers will always give them money. The local bankers, they give the guarantee that the payment of this amount which you have contracted with the ijaredars or with these revenue farmers, they are going to give you. Okay, because the ijaredars were not rich people, they were just revenue farmers. They just bid. They were just bidding. But there has to be some bank guarantee, and this bank guarantee that 500 every year or every month we are going to pay you. Who gave this guarantee? Local bankers, local Mahajans, Seth, Sahukar. Okay, what happened then? The ijaredars or the revenue farmers, they were also given freedom that you assess this land and collect the tax. You have to give us 500. We don't care that you take 1000 or 1500 or whatever amount. We don't care. But you have to give us 500. So they were given full freedom that you reassess the revenue, you collect whatever amount you want. Now here, this kind of development, this created a new social, era. Social groups like the bankers, the money lenders, they grew up. Their influence grew up. Okay, why these money lenders and bankers came into picture? Why their influence increased? This is why. So this is how the state revenue system was now under the almost control, not on the state, not with the ijaredars, but with the loaners, means loan givers, the bankers, and the all these money which is given by these big people. Okay. So let us talk about Bengal now. Okay. So Bengal, you see, whatever I told about these is almost same. About Awadh, about Hyderabad, almost same. So we are talking about Bengal, and we are talking about Murshid Quli Khan. He is Murshid Quli Khan. So Murshid Quli Khan, under his control or he was, first thing is, Murshid Quli Khan, I told you both of the earlier discussion, they were Mansabdars. They were governors. But Murshid Quli Khan was not the governor, not the Subedar, but he was the deputy of the, like says Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister. So he was the deputy Subedar. But he never became a Subedar, right? But he was so powerful. He must be having something, some power or some way of dealing with these conditions. So Murshid Quli Khan, he quickly seized all the power. He quickly controlled all the power. Murshidabad, see, this is the name of his. It was made the capital. So Murshid Quli Khan, he controlled he commanded the revenue administration, the revenue, everything is about money. So he controlled the revenue administration, and whosoever is getting money, he is going to be the ruler. So he also tried to stop the Mughal interference. So what he did, the commanders, the people who have come directly from Mughals, they were being transferred. They were transferred to Odisha, nearby state. Means they were just said, okay, your work is done. Now I am transferring you to the Odisha because I want my people. I want this area. Murshid Quli Khan, and he also did the same thing as the other did. The reassessment of the revenues of the Bengal, which region should give what amount. So there was a major reassessment under the reign of Murshid Quli Khan, and they were very strict. They were very strict in collecting the revenue. They don't leave people. So if you are a zamindar, you have to give this money. Anyhow, by hook or a crook, you have to give us money. But if the zamindars are not able to give money, they were not all big zamindars. So they have to borrow money from whom? From bankers and money lenders, from big people, from people who can give them money. So these zamindars were taking money from bankers and money lenders. So finally, if they were not able to pay, they have to give the land to big zamindars, larger zamindars. This was the problem. Okay, but still, the state became powerful. The state became powerful, and there was a close nexus relationship which emerged between the state, Bengal state, and the bankers and the loaners. So whatever was seen in Hyderabad and Awadh, almost same thing was seen here. And as I said, Murshid Quli Khan, now this picture is of what? Alivardi Khan. After that, Alivardi Khan came. So Alivardi Khan, there was a man who grew so much that he became the most rich person of whole subcontinent. Can you imagine? So I am talking about Alivardi Khan, 1742. Let me tell you again. I am saying that the nexus between the banker, not nexus, but the relationship with the banker and state, the close net relationship emerged that under the reign or the rule of Alivardi Khan, and he came from this genealogy only, Murshid Quli Khan, Alivardi Khan, in his control, house of Jagat Sheikh, and he was so powerful, he was having so much money at that time, he became so prosperous, even the Britishers would take money from him. You can imagine? Even the Britishers would take money from Jagat Seth. He became like today's Ambani, today's Mukesh Ambani, he was at that time. Okay, he was Sahukar, Seth, Mahajan, Loner, whatever you say. But Alivardi Khan, under the reign 1740 to 1756, around 16 years of reign. Now, as I said, Awadh, or you talk about Bengal, or you talk about Hyderabad, in all these people of Mansabdar, they were highest noble, okay, but still they were quite Sandehaspad, they were quite suspicious about certain things which Mughal Empire did. First of all, because Mughal Empire, because they wanted to change it. They were having their own mindset. The time has also changed. Like the Jagirdar system, they never believed. Jagirdari system, they didn't want. And second thing was how the Mughal, in the reign of Mughal, the tax was collected, the money was collected. So that tax collection, they never, found it good. So all these three regimes, they always tried to do this using the ijaredar, like they contracted with the revenue farmers, like they'd give the land to certain revenue farmers or the ijaredar, and those ijaredar will be responsible to give them money, and that will be fixed, so a fixed amount will come always. This practice of ijaredar, if you see Mughal Empire, they really disapproved these ijaredari system. There was more feature about these three, what they think is the emerging relationship between the bankers, merchants, sahukar, seth, all whatever name you take. They will have money, they will give the money for the interest. So all these and the state, there were a close net relationship between them. Okay, so these big people, they were giving money to the ijaredars, and these revenue farmers, they receive these people. These people, the loan people, they will always go to their land. They will collect security, and they also take tax sometimes, because they would send their agents, because it happens. At that time, it was Watan Jagirs of the Rajput. And Jagir is what? That is, an area is given to certain person, mansabdar or a king, and he is allowed to take all the taxation, that is the land revenue. Watan Jagir is something different. That is, a land is given, or the area is given, or a regime is given, so that it belongs to them permanently. So when we talk about these Rajput kings, and we are specifically talking about Amber and Jodhpur. So Amber, whenever I talk about Amber, just remember we are talking about Jaipur, present day Jaipur. So Amber and Jodhpur, remember it. Amber is Jaipur and Jodhpur, of course, you see. So the Rajput kings, they served with Mughal as very close associates with distinction. So they were working, and that is how, because they were working as close associate, they were permitted, or they were given a proper autonomy, and the place which they own is totally theirs, and that is why we call it them as Watan Jagirs, totally to them. See, insan ki bhook means people requirement, desire never stops. So here we have Savai Raja Jai Singh, we have Ajit Singh of Marwar. Everyone tries that we have this Jagir, we have this Watan Jagir, why not to add the nearby areas? So they wanted to extend the control, they wanted to get the control of the nearby areas. Everyone wants that at that time. It is not only with Mughals or the Abdalis or Nadir Shahs. Everyone wants to extend their control. So Ajit Singh, please see the faces of this Ajit Singh and Savai Raja Singh. So we are talking about Ajit Singh and Savai Raja Singh. Ajit Singh, he was actually the ruler of Jodhpur. So as I said previously, when the later Mughal came, so there were two factions of the court. One was Iranians, one was Turkish. So Ajit Singh, he tried to make use of this. He actually got involved in this factional, because there were two factions, Iranis and this Turkish. So he entered into this politics, which was actually happening in the Mughal court, later Mughal court. And these families, they claim, because when they saw the potential of all the problems which are happening, they started claiming the Subedari. They started asking for the Subedari, that give us the Subedari of these provinces. Which were the provinces? Gujarat and Malwa. So I am writing J here because he is from Jodhpur, and he got the Gujarat province, and Savai Raja Jai Singh, he got the Subedari of Amber, Jaipur. Amber, Jaipur, same. Okay, previous Amber is today's Jaipur. So the Ajit Singh got the Subedari of Gujarat, and Raja Jai Singh got of this Amber, and they got the governorship of Malwa. Raja Jai Singh of Amber also got the governorship of Malwa. Let me show you the area. So this is the Gujarat area, and this is the Malwa area. That is how Gujarat, Malwa, they got the area, provinces, and governorship also. Raja Jai Singh got of Malwa. Now the later Mughals, they were very dhila. They were not so strong. So Jahandar Shah, he is also one of the later Mughals. He did what? He renewed this governorship, this Subedariship. That is, if you have a vehicle and insurance, you always have to renew this insurance every year to get it renewed, to get it new. So this get renewed. These Subedari, which Raja Jai Singh of Malwa and Ajay Singh, who got the area Gujarat, they got renewed by Jahandar Shah. This was going on. As I said, people always want more area. So this also extended. Someone got Gujarat, someone got Malwa, and everyone wants to extend their area also. This happened in history. This happens today also. So Nagaur, this is also an area. It is near this Jodhpur. So Nagaur was conquered and annexed. It was taken up by Jodhpur. Nagaur was combined or annexed and combined with Jodhpur, right? Nagaur. And when we talk about Bundi, Amber took control, or Jaipur people got control of the Bundi, various portions of Bundi. All these are nearby areas, right? So Amber got Bundi or annexed Bundi, and Jodhpur got this Nagaur. So Raja Jai Singh, he created a new capital, or he designated a new capital at Jaipur. And also, can you imagine, he got the Subedari of Agra in 1722. If you remember, Agra and Delhi were the basic governing points of Mughal emperors. But because Agra made fort in Agra, Akbar, and then Shah Jahan took his capital to Shahjahanabad. So he got Subedari of Agra also, Raja Jai Singh, in 1722. Can you imagine? 1722, Savai Raja Jai Singh, he got the Subedari of Agra. You need to remember this. So he became very important at that time. And the Maratha campaigns, because it was coming into Rajasthan, Marathas, when we'll talk about Marathas, they went everywhere. Even they had a fight in Panipat. So Maratha campaigns into Rajasthan from the 1740s, and this put severe pressure on the expansion of this Jodhpur area and Jaipur area. Jaipur, Jodhpur kings, they wanted to extend their area, but there were whom? There were Marathas who stopped them, who controlled them, who checked their expansion, which was ever growing. Now talking about Sikhs. So we have talked about Sikhs in the previous discussions also. So these are 1 to 10 gurus of Sikh religion. And the organization of Sikh, the Sangathan of Sikh, the group of Sikhs, and they had a political community, the 17th century I'm talking about. And this strong organization of this Sikhs, which was a political community, they actually were able to build a state or Niv, or the basic building block of Punjab, today's Punjab. Because the basic building block, or you can say the foundation, was being laid down at this time, 17th century. Organization of Sikhs did that. Punjab, what is important about Punjab? Ab means river and Panj means 5. So there are 5 rivers. It's a very fertile area, very good area, very important area. So Guru Gobind Singh, what he did, before and after also, he established the institution of Khalsa. He had to fight with Mughals and Rajputs. So 1699, as I was saying, that he established or instituted Khalsa. Before this also, after this also, he was in constant confrontation and fight with the Mughal rulers and also the Rajput rulers. So once, after the demise of Guru Gobind Singh, after his death in 1708, what happened? There has to be some leader. So now came because he entered the scene, Banda Singh Bahadur. Guru Gobind Singh was not there. So Banda Bahadur, under his leadership, now this Khalsa, same Khalsa, this Khalsa revolted under his leadership against the Mughal authority. That means Banda Bahadur challenged the Mughal authority. And in order to show that this is done or this can happen, Banda Bahadur prepared or distributed or coined a coin which is having the name of Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind Singh. Guru Nanak the first Guru and the 10th Guru is Guru Gobind Singh. It was being established. So he struck the coin, Banda Bahadur, in order to show the might, the might of the Sikh regime. And in his regime only, from Satluj river to Jamuna river, the Sikh administration under this Banda Bahadur, the Khalsa, it extended from Satluj to Jamuna. I am talking about Satluj. Satluj is here and Jamuna is here. So from Satluj to Jamuna under BB, that is the Banda Bahadur, this whole region was taken up or it was controlled by them. But what happened? Banda Bahadur was captured in 1715 and finally he was executed in 1716. 1715 he was captured, 1716 he was executed. Now coming to the 18th century, as we see, Sikhs are great leaders. We have already seen that, today also. So the Sikh leaders in 18th century, there were various able leaders, various capable leaders. And there were different jathas and missals. Jathas because Sikhs were organized into bands called jathas and then later it was called as missals. Jatha or misl. That is only, you can say, the group of people. Jatha and misl. Group of certain people who is having certain leader. So this is what happened. So these jathas, different jathas and misl, they would combine, they will come together, and when they combine, these combined forces were known as Grand Army. Grand Army. Jatha and missiles combined and they were called as Grand Army, and in the natural language it was called as Dal Khalsa. Dal Khalsa. Punjabi know this word. Dal Khalsa. Jatha and missile. So this was an entire body. This is a whole body, and they also used to meet at where? At Amritsar. So Jatha 1, Jatha 2, missile 1, missile 2. They all get combined. This is a combined entity. And they would meet at Amritsar. And in various festivals, especially the very important festival Baisakhi and also Diwali. Baisakhi, Diwali, they would meet and they will take certain combined or collective decisions. They will sit, they will, deliberate and take certain decisions regarding their regime, what to do, what not to do. So these resolutions and these decisions were called as Guru Mattas. Guru Mattas, or you can call it as a resolution of the Guru. Resolution of the Gurus. That is, all the Gurus, all the leaders which have met, now they have combinedly defined and combinedly devised that this is what we have to do. See, any king or any leader, because they are not doing any work, they will only have a regime or a kingdom when they will take tax, money, revenue, kar. So they have to take. So the system of their taxation was called as Rakhi. The taxation was called Rakhi, and it was basically what? 20% of what is you are producing. So you are a farmer or a peasant, you have a land or whatever you are producing or whatever you are doing. So if you are having say 100 quintal, we are producing 20 quintals will be you have to give to us. And what we'll do, because we are Jatha, missiles, and we are Dal Khalsa has now the responsibility to protect you. Whatever happens bad to you, if something attacks you, Dal Khalsa is going to protect you, but you have to give us 20% of whatever you produce. So Guru Gobind Singh, as I said, he was an inspiring figure. He inspired the Khalsa, and he put in mind and in heart of the people, the Sikh people, that the destiny of the Sikhs is to rule, is to be a ruler. We are going to rule. This is what Guru Gobind Singh inspired everyone. And that is what is called as Raj Karega Khalsa. Means the Khalsa is going to rule, Sikhs will rule. So this was not, nobody can say like this if they don't have a good organization. So it was a proper, well-knit, well-organized, Niyojit kind of organization. And that put a resistance to the Mughal governors. Means, if they don't have a good organization, they cannot even talk about coming in front of Mughal governors. But they did it. They did it. Mughal governors first. And then to Ahmad Shah Abdali also. Ahmad Shah Abdali was supposed to be very powerful. So Ahmad Shah Abdali, can you imagine? So this Ahmad Shah Abdali who had taken up the Punjab, the rich, proper part of Punjab, and also the Sarkar of Sarhind from the Mughals. So the Sikhs have put resistance to these Mughal emperors, also to the Ahmad Shah Abdali. So what I'm trying to suggest is, the Khalsa, they again strike their own coin again in 1765, and this inscription on this coin was same thing what was there when Banda Bahadur was there. So it was issued by Khalsa in the time of Banda Bahadur. Those particular orders, Adesh, were in the same inscription that was the coin was struck in 1765, right? So if you talk about the Sikh territories in the later part of 18th century, they extended it from Indus to Jamuna. As previously it was Satluj to Jamuna. Now it has gone from Jamuna to Indus. That is, they have extended their regime. Okay, let me show you the area. Previously from there, here to here they were. But now they have extended it up to Sindhu, Indus River. So this Sindhu to was quite a jump, Sindhu to Jamuna, Indus to Jamuna. But the point was that these Sikhs were divided into different rulers. Every Jatha, Misal and every part was having different Sikh Guru. Or now came the Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Now he did a great job. Mutti jab tak band hai, if a hand is, is a fist means a power. So he combined them. He united them all. That is how Ranjit Singh became so important. He reunited these groups, and now he established his capital at Lahore in 1799. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he created or he finalized the capital at Lahore. Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Okay. At that time, it was the Marathas. Let us talk about the Marathas. Let me take you to the place where the center point was there, the area regime. This was the Pune, the capital of Marathas, and this whole area shaded. And if you see these lines shows where Marathas went, or to which places they ventured. Panipat Third War, 1761. Marathas went up to Panipat, so that war was fought in Panipat. So you can imagine the extent Maratha kingdom has. So MK Maratha kingdom, basically, they were fighting against the Mughal rule. Sometimes Mughal will be having upper hand, sometimes they will be having upper hand. So always there will be a conflict. They were fighting against them. So the first and the important actually is Shivaji Maharaj, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Even the railway station of Mumbai is Chhatrapati Shivaji terminus. So this 1627 Shivaji Maharaj, 1627 till 1680 he was there, and he made he established a very, very strong kingdom, and there was a support with whom they actually made this kingdom. So there were powerful warrior families, and these were called as Deshmukhs. Deshmukhs, powerful warrior families. Okay, first thing, these were the source of Shivaji power, and along with this, any army, any Mughal, any Delhi Sultanate, if they don't have a strong army, that is the walking soldiers, so they were peasants and pastoralists, that is Pashu Charak, and these were very strong, highly mobile, very agile, and they were Kunbis, and they were actually the basement, the bare backbone of Maratha army. So this was Maratha's backbone, this army. So after Shivaji Maharaj's death, when he died, so the effective power was with whom? Because after Shivaji Maharaj, his kid, then his kid, and background, as I said, there are strong minds, strong, say, the politicians, and they were the Peshwas. These, you see, these were Chitpavan Brahmins. These were Chitpavan Brahmins, and those who came after Shivaji, means even with Shivaji and after Shivaji's successors, they worked with him and they were called as Peshwa. They were called as Peshwa, basically the principal minister, or you can say the mind of the king. So today you see Pune, or today's Pune became the capital of Marathas. If you go forward, this Peshwa, because they had a very strong military organization, that is how they can conquer, they can get hold of this vast empire. Okay. So what will happen? A fortification, one king will come, and if they are able to enter this fort, they win. But these Marathas and Peshwas, they didn't do that. When the Mughal armies are moving, they will raid them, or they will do the guerrilla warfare. That is, there will be no reinforcement possibility or supply line are cut for these Mughal armies. So that is how they attack from the back, they attack from the side, and surprise attack, and that is called guerrilla warfare. So that is how they were able to counter or decimate sometimes the Mughal empire, Mughal armies, this guerrilla warfare, though they were very strong, the Mughals were very strong, but still because of this kind of war, they did it because they had a very good military organization, right? Okay, coming to 1720 till 1761, this Maratha empire expanded exponentially, immensely. Okay, and can you imagine, they actually took Malwa and Gujarat from Mughals. By the 1720s, they have already got Malwa and Gujarat from Mughals. Can you imagine? So this, up till this 1730, they became this power and they became the overlord of this whole area, this Deccan Peninsula, this whole area. Okay, so this area they actually captured, and because they were overlord, they possess the right, because when they are becoming king or any army, they have to take care. They have to levy some taxes. They have to take some taxes, lagan, kar. So because of this army, because they were having a vast area, so they levied tax, they imposed tax, and these taxes were called as two type of taxes are there, Chauth and Sardeshmukhi. These taxes are Chauth and Sardeshmukhi. So what is Chauth and what is Sardeshmukhi? Wherever they are having direct control, okay, means those possessed or they have captured that area, they will take 25 from 100, whatever is there, 1/4. So 25% of the land revenue which are claimed by zamindars in the Deccan, this was collected by the Marathas. Okay, so this is 1/4. Marathas will take 25%. There is one more tax which is Sardeshmukhi. So this is 1/4 plus 9 to 10%. For example, if 100 is what the farmer has produced, they will take 25 because of Chauth and 10 more or 9 more because of Sardeshmukhi. It's a kind of cess, revenue. So this Sardeshmukhi are collected by whom? The head revenue collector in the Deccan. The head revenue collector in the Deccan. So the place where they have direct control, they levy Sardeshmukhi as well, and others they only apply Chauth. So when they actually expanded, as I said, they went different parts, because when they raided or they entered Delhi 1737, there are different factions, different areas they tried to capture. Rajasthan, Punjab, Bengal, Odisha, in the east, Karnataka, and there are countries, that is the villages of Tamil and Telugu also. Means everywhere they actually conquered. But it was not a part of Maratha Empire like Mughal Empire. It was not. So they just made the other person to pay something. That is, when the other person will agree that okay, you actually got over us, so Maratha will take money from them, enormous resources. So when they take money or resources, so everywhere there is this is kind of a graph. So whatever they were doing, Marathas, it came with a price, because they were actually attacking, getting control of all these, taking money from them, or trying to get the tribute or gift from them. So they actually came a price, because when they are attacking these different places, people there or the rulers there, they became hostile towards Marathas. That is, they went against Marathas. They were not liking the Marathas controlling or taking over these many parts. So in 1761, there was a battle of Panipat in 1761. So it was between Marathas and Afghans, and finally Afghans they conquered, or the Maratha got lost. They lost just because people there were not supporting Marathas. They are supporting Afghans. Along with this, Marathas, they were very good administrative system they had, Prashasanik Tantra. So they will go to different places, especially the groundwork they will do. They encourage the agriculture and revive the trade, which was not that good previously. And the Marathas chiefs, this made this kind of more remuneration. They made these name I am taking. These names are Scindia of Gwalior, Gaikwad of Baroda, and Bhosle of Nagpur. These were main chief. So I'll take two names, the very important places right now also. Under the patronage of Ujjain, this Scindia, it was Ujjain, and under Holkar, it was Indore. Again, Ujjain under Scindia, and Indore under Holkar. Okay. So these cities, they became very important hub. Like the commercial center and the cultural center. So let me tell you again, the chiefs, the Sardars, Scindia of Gwalior, Gaikwad of Baroda, and Bhosle of Nagpur came up. And these two cities I am talking about, they became commercial and cultural centers, Ujjain and Indore. So this is very important, because at that time, it was all because of the influence of the Marathas. And they found new routes also, trade routes. So this silk which was produced in this region which I am showing, Chanderi region, have new market now. Pune, because Pune is the capital of Marathas. And the Burhanpur, because it was trading only with Agra and Surat. Now it has new two and different other places where it can sell. That is Pune and Nagpur. Lucknow, Allahabad. So Pune and Nagpur in the south, Lucknow and Allahabad in the east. So Burhanpur from here, there are different things that can go. Trading can be done. So that is how they went for agriculture, trade, and everything happened that time. Now coming to the Jats. Jat. You see the name Jat. It has a valor in it, strength in it. So Jats, these they got the power or consolidated the power in late 17th and 18th century. They consolidated their power in this Vyavasthit. And there is a leader, his name is Chudaman. His name is Dheer Veer Rava Chudamanji, Chudaman. And they got control, or he acquired control over the west part of city of Delhi right now. So this is west. So west part of Delhi, he actually got control or acquired control of this part, Chudamanji, Chudaman. And by the 1680s, these Jats, they start dominating. And these cities are Delhi and Agra. Can you imagine? Delhi and Agra. Delhi and Agra are the capitals of Mughal Empire. But now the Jats, even let me tell you, they actually were custodians, Sangrakshak of city of Agra. So Agra was the capital. Agra was the capital of various Mughal emperors. And when you get control over it, that means you are actually powerful. The Jats were actually, they were agriculturists. And they were prosperous. That is, they were having good money. But they were peasants and farmers. And two places, towns, Panipat and Ballabgarh, they were important trading center. That is, Vyapari Kendra. Trading, buying, selling was going on. And here we have Surajmal, and under him the kingdom of Bharatpur. Under Maharaj Surajmal, Bharatpur. It is very near to Agra. If you go take train from Delhi to Mumbai, you will see this Bharat will come. So this Bharatpur, it became a very strong state under Surajmal. If you see Nadir Shah, when he sacked down, when he akraman the Delhi in 1739, various important people who were in Delhi, they just ran into him, that is Surajmal, and they asked his shelter. They wanted refuge. Okay, please save us because this Nadir Shah has come. So his son, Nadir Shah's son, Jawahir Shah, he had 30,000 troops, his own, and hired another 20,000 Marathas and 15,000 Sikh troops to fight whom? The Mughals. So you can imagine the power of Jats and how they also created the strength. And these are two forts I am showing. This is Bharatpur fort, and it was made in a very conventional and traditional style. That is, they combined the styles of Amber and Agra. So Dig is a place where they made it, and it was all garden palace like the Humayun ka Aqbara and like the Taj Mahal. So they combined the architecture of Amber and Agra. Amber is basically the Jaipur right now. So this is about the Jats. Now coming to the French Revolution. This is about 1789 to 1794. So I'll talk about the American also and French Revolution also. So the American and French Revolution, both revolutionized things. So they were actually against, and they were challenging, they're countering the power which are gained and enjoyed by the aristocrats. So the French Revolution, mainly the middle classes, the peasants, the artisans, they fought against these special rights which are enjoyed by the clergy and the nobility. Clergy means church related, and nobility means the higher and upper class at those places. So they were saying that if you are born in some nobility or clergy, you don't get right by birth. You have to own it, you have to achieve it. That is, everyone should have their position basis of the merit. That is, everyone should have equal laws and opportunities should be equal for everyone. Any poor, any rich, no difference should be there. And they wanted to participate every year. Previously, clergies and nobility, they only have that last say. They will vote and they'll decide. And the revolutionaries said that we want to be, or we need to be given participation in all the affairs of the country. That is, we need to be treated as citizens. So the citizenship idea, the nation state, our country like this, and the democratic rights, these all things came into India from late 19th century. In our subcontinent in India, this came from the late 19th century, after 1850, you can imagine. So this is how the French Revolution revolutionized the world, and it revolutionized the India or Indian people and Indian subcontinent as well. Right? So this is all about this chapter. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.